Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be doing a review for Deadpool and Wolverine today. Now don't worry, there's going to be no spoilers in the first part of this review. It's going to be a spoiler-free review. However, there will be a spoilers section after my spoiler-free review and I will give you notice well in advance. Deadpool is about to lose his whole world and he needs to recruit Wolverine to stop that from happening. I'm going to quickly talk about the story, guys, because within the story, there's not much there, to be honest. Now, it's not a massive negative because instead of the story, we get a lot of cameos and we get a lot of expose for it all as well. It was all definitely intentional. I think they knew that. I think they knew that they were going to prioritize the cameos and the expose over the storyline, and for the most part it worked, but at the end of the day and ultimately I wanted to see a more coherent story, and it's something that we didn't get. The story didn't feel like it was going anywhere, and at one point I thought maybe they're going to turn it around here and they're going to concentrate on it, but they didn't. So as well as the story not going anywhere, when we get to the end of the movie, it went nowhere. Hugh Jackman acted the shit out of Wolverine. He wasn't the best Wolverine that we've ever had. It's probably still Logan. But in terms of the acting in this film, Hugh Jackman felt like he was out of place because he was just amazing. Every scene he played Wolverine, there was a few scenes where it was quite a heartfelt moment, and it was amazing. Sometimes the heartfelt moments, though, were overcrowded by some of the comedy. But again, Hugh Jackman did shine throughout the entire film. Ryan Reynolds played the most Ryan Reynolds he's ever done in a Deadpool film. And luckily, for me anyway, luckily he wore his mask most of the movie, quite a lot of the film anyway. So we didn't get to see that silly mouth that he makes when he tries to do an unfunny joke, when he does something like this. And he does a weird mouth thing where he thinks he's being funny and he actually isn't. So he was not bad in this film. I'm not saying Ryan Reynolds is a bad actor. I think he's fantastic as Deadpool, but some of the one-liners that he comes out with, some of the jokes that he tries to pull don't land for me. But this one, he was bearable. We had cameos galore. Don't worry, I'm not going to mention any of the cameos, even the ones that look obvious from the trailers. I won't mention any of the cameos. However, the cameos, some of the cameos worked. Some of the cameos made sense, but some of them didn't work and some of them didn't make sense at all. And most of them, if not all of them, were just for fan service. It was a fan service film at the end of the day, and I think they knew that getting into it, and we knew that getting into it. So I think if your fan service has been delivered, then they've done their job. I've never seen the Loki TV show, so I wasn't sure about the TVA or what they done. However, getting into this film, I didn't think the TVA would play a bigger role as they did in the movie. I think the TVA did play a big pivotal role, and I think that's because they were required for things that happened in the movie, for certain things. So if you haven't seen the TV show for Loki, I still don't think it matters too much because I'd never seen it and I still understood what was happening. There was a weak yet powerful villain in the movie, and this now being an MCU film done by Marvel and Disney, we get the exact same Marvel Disney villains that we've had for the past 4 or 5 years, and that they're generic and useless. And we get that in this one. Unfortunately, there was a villain in it that I won't mention their name. There was a villain in it that had very powerful abilities and they weren't utilized to the way that they should have been used. And then when they were brought into the MCU, it was just a classic, typical MCU villain where they were like a MacGuffin for nothing. And then that was it. There was a lot of comedy, and just like the first two movies, some of the comedy landed, some of it didn't. I do feel, though, that some of the comedy, when it was great, it was fantastic, and even Hugh Jackman was funny as Wolverine, but sometimes comedy is not required. When you've got an actor like Hugh Jackman in a Deadpool movie, I felt like they should have toned the comedy down and made it a little bit more serious because of what's at stake, but they didn't. They amped it up more, and sometimes Wolverine looked like a joke. And it looked like in Hugh Jackman's eyes, he was angry. Maybe that's just great acting, but I just felt like he looked a little bit out of place and embarrassed at times when the comedy was brought in at times that it shouldn't have been. I laughed. I laughed throughout the whole entire movie, but there was just some scenes where I thought the comedy wasn't necessary there. If I'm being honest though, I thought that Hugh Jackman was funnier than Ryan Reynolds. I genuinely don't think that takes a lot because I don't think Ryan Reynolds is funny. I think he forces himself to think that he's funny, and I think when you do that as an actor, it doesn't work. So in terms of the comedy, Hugh Jackman was a lot funnier. Hugh Jackman was, of course, the standout as Wolverine in the movie out of all the cast, but there were some cameos some that I didn't expect to be there, and the cameos that did work were actually really good. I think there's a couple, again, I won't mention until the spoilers, but there was a couple of cameos that came that played a little bit more of a role than I thought they would, and I enjoyed them as their cameo characters. There is a post-credit scene in this film, and to save you all time, I won't spoil it, but to save you time, guys, I wouldn't wait for it. That's all I'll say. It doesn't have any effect on the stories of what's to come. So you don't need to stay for the post-credit scene. You can if you want a little bit of a giggle, but you don't have to stay to the end. And if you don't really want to stay to the end, just wait for the Blu-ray or the 4K when it comes out and you can watch it then. It's kind of pointless. Okay, guys, you've got to the end of the non-spoiler part of the review. Now it's time to go into the spoiler talk. The short premise that I gave at the beginning of this review is actually the full story. There's not much else to it other than cameos and fan service. So when Deadpool says he needs Wolverine to help him to save his world, as in his family and friends, that's exactly what it is. Now, there is a bigger issue at play where his timeline will eventually die out within the next couple of thousand years. So it's not an immediate issue right now. But the TVA says, well, let's just deal with it just now. So that's when Deadpool comes in and says, well, I want to save my family and friends, and I need the help from Wolverine, who was the hero of his timeline, his universe. And that's basically the story. Now, there was a bit at the start that I really did like when he said he's going to resurrect the Logan from his timeline. And it turns out he is dead. He's just bones and adamantium, which I found quite funny. And that was at the very beginning. When you look at the trailers for the film, I always watch the trailers for Deadpool and Wolverine thinking they're only showing us certain parts of this film. And I'm guessing that everything's going to be blown wide open when we see the actual events unfold. But we see everything in the trailers. Absolutely everything about this film and the story is in the trailers, apart from the special cameos that we got. But if you watch the trailers and slice them together, you've kind of got the full movie. I was gutted to see that we got no Josh Brolin. I think Josh Brolin would have been perfect for a film like this because he played Thanos and he played Cable. I think it would have been perfect to kind of mingle both characters together in a fun way, but they didn't do that. We had Happy Hogan. There was a scene where Wade was trying to get into the Avengers in 2018 when Tony Stark was still alive, and we got a scene with Happy Hogan doing an interview with Wade Wilson. And because Tony Stark was still alive at that point, it was the perfect opportunity to bring in Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. They made a joke about it in that specific scene that they don't have the money for it. But why not? Why not just bring Tony Stark in for that one scene? I think it was a missed opportunity. Now, I've got a list of cameos that I remember. I've got my phone with me, guys, because I won't remember them all off by heart. But the first one was Johnny Storm. Now, we thought it was, well, Wade thought it was going to be Captain America. I knew straight away that it was Johnny Storm, played by Chris Evans, but it was Johnny Storm that was playing. So that was a kind of fun play on him playing two different characters, which takes me back to Josh Brolin. Why not just bring Josh Brolin in as well to do two characters? But they didn't do it, and we had Johnny Storm instead. So Johnny Storm, he was a good cameo, and he played a bigger role than I thought he would. We also had Sabretooth, who played nothing at all, really. Toad didn't really have a part to play. Pyro had one of the biggest parts to play. We had the Deadpool variants, which some were fun, some were not. We had Wolverine variants, which were quite fun to see. We had a 5'4" variant Wolverine, which was quite funny to see. We also had the Henry Cavill version of Wolverine, which I think was probably the biggest one. Does that mean that he's going to end up playing Wolverine in the future? Probably not. I think it's just a fun cameo. We had the Cool Corpse at the start, which was the Logan from the Logan film. We had Hulk, just in a split second scene. We had Elektra, who played a massive role in the film. We had Gambit. Now, Gambit was the one I wanted to see, and we got him, but he was played by Channing Tatum, which I didn't like. Now, I'll be honest, I don't think he was bad in this film. Channing Tatum is the worst actor of all time, but he wasn't terrible in this. I would have much preferred to have seen Taylor Kitsch as Gambit because I thought he was fantastic in the original Wolverine film. But Channing Tatum, he's a terrible actor. But for some reason, anytime I saw Gambit on screen and the powers that he had, I loved it. The biggest one for me is Blade. Now, Blade is what made me love the Marvel, well, we can call it the Marvel Cinematic Universe now because they've all been brought in to this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And Blade was obviously one of my favourite Marvel films of all time. It still is. And just seeing Wesley Snipes back playing Blade, it was a dream come true. He even had that one-liner that we all love, some motherfuckers are still trying to ice skate uphill, and he does it in this one, which was fantastic. Laura was back as X-23. We had a bit of Lady Deathstrike, not played by Kelly Hu, of course. We had Juggernaut, not played by Vinnie Jones, unfortunately. Azazel was back as well. Thor made a small cameo, and obviously Happy Hogan that we mentioned before. I'm sure there's more in there that I maybe didn't notice or completely forgotten all about, but I'm sure you guys can let me know in the comments. When you look at all these cameos that were brought in, even when you look at the characters that were in the film as well, it definitely felt more mutant heavy. There was less human beings like Iron Man or Tony Stark and more mutants. So this is obviously the introduction to the mutant community within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We even got the mention of adamantium, which I don't think we've had before in the MCU. I think this is the very first time adamantium was mentioned, because we obviously changed it to vibranium. But this is adamantium time. Wolverine gets his cowl for the first time too. Obviously, he gets his costume for the first time, which had a heartfelt story behind it when he talks about the X-Men all dying. So he wears it in honor of the X-Men. But he also has that famous cowl that we've never seen before in the movies. And it was an epic moment when he pulled the cowl on, but not an epic fight, because he was fighting against Deadpool variants, which I didn't really like, which is annoying because I thought it was going to be cool. But seeing them fighting the Deadpool variants, and this is the same with a lot of scenes where they're doing this big fight scene and it's a pointless fight scene. There's no reason for them to fight in this specific scene. They just do it for fan service. Now, yes, we do get Lady Deadpool, but there's no confirmation as to who was playing Lady Deadpool because she never took that mask off. It was probably Blake Lively, because I think it sounded like Blake Lively. We even had Matthew McConaughey playing one of the Deadpool variants too. But again, he doesn't take the mask off. We even had a Welsh Deadpool, which is in honour of Ryan Reynolds' football team, Wrexham. But just like that Deadpool fight with the variants, none of the fight scenes had any weight to them until the very end of the movie. But the rest of the film, when we got some mediocre fighting or some fighting between Deadpool and Wolverine, Sabretooth and Wolverine, they just held no weight. There was a big fight that took place in the Void. Now, the Void is a place where mutants and heroes go when they're banished. And the movie did take place in the Void quite a lot, but there was a big fight when Gambit, Blade, Elektra, X-23, Wolverine, Deadpool all started fighting most of the X-Men villains in this fight scene, with Cassandra Nova being the big baddie. They're all fighting together in this one scene, and that's one of the biggest fights in the film. And again, it's eye-pleasing because it gives fan service to the fans that have loved these comic book movies since the late 90s, the early noughties. But that's all it really does. Cassandra Nova is the sister of Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier in this timeline doesn't know that she exists, so she stays there willingly. She can leave anytime she wants, but she doesn't. She's got the Doctor Strange ring where she can leave whenever she wants, and when she finds out that she's been double-crossed, that's when she decides to leave and goes towards Deadpool and Wolverine's timeline to take over. And it's just the exact same as every other villain story, where they're going to annihilate the universe and go along other timelines and other universes and take them all out until all that's left is the Void. Typical. We also get a typical ending to the film where one hero can't do it themselves without dying, and both of them have to stop Cassandra in order to beat her and survive. Now, I will admit that's probably the most epic scene in the film, when Wolverine and Deadpool are locking arms together, holding on to that wire to stop Cassandra Nova from ending all the timelines. It was an epic moment, because when you look back in the Avengers films, it takes 6, 7, sometimes 100 characters to stop the bad guys from ending timelines and universes. Cassandra Nova was literally doing that right now. She was ending every universe, every world or whatever, and it only took 2 heroes to stop her, Deadpool and Wolverine. So it was an epic moment, one of the best moments in the film that I actually really loved, but it was a quite quick moment and it ended quite easily. But like a lot of the heartfelt moments that we get, it ends with humor that's just unnecessary. Something similar happens at the very end when it's so epic. There's a little bit of humor added in that kind of takes away that heartfelt moment. And I didn't like that part because it ended with the humor. And I've said it throughout this review, where the humor kind of takes precedent over some of the heartfelt story moments, and the ending kind of does that as well. Not all humor was bad though. Some of it was unnecessary. In fact, a lot of it was unnecessary. I do like the humor. I do love it when it's funny, but if you get too much of a good thing, it can become a little sour. Did it save the MCU? Did it save the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Not in my opinion, because we haven't seen anything new. What we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine is just a better version of what we saw in Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. And I don't even think it's got a better cameo role than what we saw in No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that the Spider-Man one done it better because they had characters that meant something to the story, and also the characters were in a story that was more coherent. I'm not saying that No Way Home is the most coherent storyline in film, but it had a more coherent story than Deadpool and Wolverine. So if you have to compare films that have cameos in it, No Way Home done it way better. But however, Deadpool and Wolverine did do it a little bit better than Multiverse of Madness. But in terms of saving the MCU, it definitely didn't do it in terms of storyline and progressing with the story. You could do mutant films in MCU moving forward without having Deadpool and Wolverine. This isn't really an introduction to those characters because they meant nothing to the story. So in terms of story, it didn't save the MCU. In terms of box office, I'm sure it will do well. But apart from that, no, it didn't save it at all. Overall though, guys, it sounds like I've got a lot of negatives for the film, and that's only because I was overhyping it for myself. I was expecting a lot more than what we got in the film. I was expecting a better storyline. However, I still enjoyed myself. It was still thoroughly entertaining. One of the best films I've seen of the year, if not the best film I've seen of the year, believe it or not. But there was a lot of nitpicks that I had in it, and I had to just pull them out in this review, guys, because it wouldn't be fair to say, loved it, brilliant, no negatives, because no film has no negatives. Deadpool and Wolverine has a lot of negatives, but they're outweighed by the fan service because I enjoyed myself. I grew up in the late 90s, early noughties watching Blade, Fantastic Four, X-Men, all those films. They all take precedent in this film, and I really enjoyed it for that. But in terms of storyline and me properly critiquing it, it's the weakest of the Deadpool films. So what are your thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine, guys? Did it exceed your expectations, or did it disappoint you at all? Leave your comments down below, guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!